Research methods, qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method designs. Quantitative design. This research paper reviews the numerous strategies, which are essential for a broader assessment and basic understanding of the topic under discussion. When making a decision on which technique to use, the choice depends on the type of objective that the study has as the main intention. For instance, if the key goal is to test a certain hypothesis, quantitative research methods will be more appropriate since quantitative technique helps to identify the relationships between several variables such as the impacts of gender or race on the compensation paid to the educators, promotion opportunities, workload, and so forth. Numerous studies have already been conducted on this particular topic. For instance, by referring to the study by Umbach, who examined statistical data about the salaries of teachers and determined to what extent they are determined by gender. When the effects of gender, independent variable, on equity in academic labor marker, dependent variable, becomes the interest of a researcher, they can choose a statistical survey or structured interview as a method of data collection. This will be necessary to determine the sample size of the population. In Umbach's, the sample under research is usually divided into two groups, male educators and female educators. Each of the respondents is questioned on the same topic or question, about the number of working hours, monthly wages, and promotion opportunities among others. A researcher should also make a point of establishing several control variables, which remain unchanged during the study. Umbach lists that this category can include work experience, degree, and academic discipline. Additionally, a researcher must maintain control over these variables because they are essential for the validity of the findings. In fact, Glazer elaborates that the respondents of the participants will be codified and then later the collected data can be analyzed with the help of t-test and ANOVA. Through such ways, one can determine whether the relationship between the variables is statistically significant. Alternatively, we need to say that quantitative design is more suitable in those cases, in which a researcher needs to test an assumption or a hypothesis. Qualitative design. Creswell argues that, while assessing the topic of equity in the academic market, a researcher can be able to use the qualitative method since this technique is more reliable and appropriate in such cases. In fact, the technique is specifically appropriate when an investigator intends to describe a certain social phenomenon to form an assumption about a specific topic. Besides, researchers in numerous areas have also adopted qualitative design. Indeed, such instance can be observed from research conducted by Kennely, who attempted to identify the sources of inequality in the academic labor market, whose research relied mostly on interviews and group discussions rather than statistical methods. An unstructured interview can be the most suitable in qualitative research, where the respondents will be asked a set of questions that would prompt them to express their views about the problem of inequality in the academic labor market. It is also necessary to use open-ended questions since they enable an interviewer to explain and expand their ideas. Examiners at all times will need to describe the challenges that they face daily. Additionally, the respondents will need to describe the factors that affect equity. Kennely et al. Are based on the fact that unstructured interviews have more than one advantage. One merit is that it enables the interviewer to clarify both questions and respondents of the participants. However, Kennely et al. Argue that it has some limitations, especially the so-called interviewer effect. This means that the subject can behave or respond differently in the presence of the interviewer. While analyzing the responses of interviewees, the researcher has to single out the most common themes or issues. Based on these findings, a scholar will be able to form a hypothesis about the factors that affect equity in the academic labor market. Later, these assumptions should be verified with the help of quantitative research methods. Mixed method design. Aanerud et al. Specify that mixed design is the third framework that is also common, and it mainly relies on the combined use of quantitative and qualitative research methods. This model is most suitable in those cases in which research has certain assumptions about the problem of inequality in the academic labor market. Under such circumstances, they can use both unstructured interviews and statistical surveys to acquire reliable data. The first tool is based on open-ended questions, whereas the second mainly focuses on Likert scale items. Just like in quantitative research, it is necessary to single out a set of variables, for instance, the gender-independent variable, on the one hand, and compensation, workload, and organizational support, on the other. A quantitative method is really helpful and can be used to determine if there is a statistically significant relationship between the variables. On the other hand, the qualitative technique enables a researcher to better understand the opinions and concerns of those people who are suffering from inequality in the workplace. According to Glazer, the interviewees are questioned about the influence of gender on the compensation received by a teacher, their workload, and promotion opportunities. Most importantly, it is necessary to determine the sample size and divide it into two groups. Each of the subjects will need to respond to the same question during the interview and a survey. Unstructured interviews and surveys are consistent with one another, and the researcher has to ensure that such consistency will become crucial when they are making the final report. The data analysis using the quantitative methods has to identify the most widespread patterns in the opinions of the respondents, whereas the purpose of statistical analysis is to understand to what extent two variables are related to one another.